There comes a point after 60 when the question is no longer, what can I still build? It becomes something quieter than that. Something heavier. Something harder to answer honestly. How do I live with what I already built? That question rarely arrives in public. It doesn't appear in conversation. It doesn't announce itself in dramatic language. It arrives in ordinary moments. A morning that moves too slowly. An evening that stays too quiet. A room in your own house that suddenly feels less like a place you pass through and more like a place where your thoughts wait for you. It is early. The light coming through the curtains is thin and gray at first, not yet warm, not yet clear. You wake before the alarm, or maybe there is no alarm anymore, only the memory of one. For a few seconds, before the day remembers itself, you lie there and feel almost nothing. Then awareness returns in layers. The room. The stillness. The absence of urgency. The fact that no one is expecting anything immediate from you. You sit up slowly. Your feet touch the floor. Cool wood. Familiar. You stand, move into the hallway, past the mirror without looking directly into it, then enter the kitchen where the air still carries last night's quiet. You fill the kettle. Turn it on. Wait. The sound of heating water becomes the first real sound of the day. You lean one hand against the counter and look out the window, but you are not really looking outside. You are looking inward without meaning to. You pour the coffee. Sit at the table. Steam rises. The cup warms your hand. Across from you, an empty chair. Not symbolic. Just there. And something inside you begins to shift. You realize you are no longer thinking about the future the way you used to. Not in tasks. Not in milestones. Not in next moves. You are thinking in larger shapes now. Longer arcs. You are beginning to see your life not as a list of ongoing projects, but as a whole. A story. And the moment your life starts to feel like a story, you stop asking only what comes next. You start asking what it all meant. That is where peace becomes necessary. Not because everything went wrong. Because enough has happened that you can no longer live only forward. Earlier in life, momentum hid this from you. Work. Family. Deadlines. Bills. Crises. Opportunities. There was always something louder than reflection. Something that required response faster than introspection. The engine of necessity kept moving, and as long as it moved, you did not have to sit too long with the emotional pattern of your own life. But after 60, something changes. Not always suddenly. Often almost politely. The engine softens. Forward motion slows. Space appears. And in that space, your life begins returning to you in pieces. You remember the way you handled pressure. The habits you repeated so often they stopped feeling like choices. The emotional distance you once called stability. The conversations you kept practical because practical felt safer than honest. The arguments you avoided. The apologies you delayed. The dreams you quietly reduced into maybe later, until later turned into never. These things do not always come with accusation. That is what makes them harder to resist. They come with clarity. You stand and carry the cup to the sink. Rinse it. Set it down. Then, instead of moving immediately to the next thing, you stop. You rest both hands on the edge of the counter and feel something you have felt more often lately, not regret exactly, but the beginning of reconciliation. There is a difference. Regret wants to go backward. Reconciliation wants to remain here and tell the truth. You are no longer asking whether your life should have been different in every way. You are beginning to ask whether you can look at it without distortion. Without romanticizing the good. Without condemning the flawed. Without pretending it all made perfect sense or that it all went terribly wrong. Just, truthfully. You walk into the living room. The morning light is stronger now, tracing pale lines across the floorboards. You sit in the chair by the window. Not because you plan to. Because you have come to associate that chair with the place where your mind stops performing efficiency. You pick up your phone. Scroll once. Put it down. None of it matters enough. Because the real work now is not external. It is internal. You are beginning to see that making peace with your life is not the same as approving of everything in it. It is not a polished summary. It is not a motivational conclusion. It is not saying, everything happened for a reason. Because some things simply happened, and some things hurt, and some things could have gone differently. Peace does not require simplification. It requires honesty with enough compassion to bear the truth. That is what this stage of life asks for. Not denial. Not endless analysis. A steadier form of seeing. You think of the younger versions of yourself. The man who chose responsibility over risk because others depended on him. The man who stayed composed because composure was rewarded. The man who thought strength meant carrying everything without making it visible. You understand him better now than you did when you were him. That, too, is strange. Age does not only give distance from the past. It sometimes gives tenderness toward it. You can see how limited your information was then. How narrow your emotional vocabulary was. How much of what you called decision was actually adaptation. And suddenly the story softens. Not because the facts change. Because your position inside them does. By late morning, sunlight has settled fully into the room. The day is clear. Normal. Nothing grand has happened. And yet something essential has begun. Your life has stopped feeling like a project to optimize and started feeling like a story you need to inhabit more truthfully. That shift is subtle. But it changes the rest of the episode. Because once you start seeing your life as a story, you stop trying to win it. You start trying to make peace with its shape. The middle of the day has a different honesty to it. Morning still carries the illusion that things can begin cleanly. Evening invites memory. But midday is blunt. It shows you the plain surface of your life without mood, without drama, without the mercy of shadows. The kitchen is brighter now. Light lands directly on the counter. Dust you would not notice in lower light becomes visible. The same happens internally after 60. Certain patterns become harder to miss. You wipe the table with a folded cloth, though it doesn't really need wiping. Open a cabinet. Close it. Rearrange two things that were already in order. Small gestures. Not because there is much to do. Because your hands still remember the old relationship between movement and control. But control feels thinner now. There is more room between action and meaning. More time for thought to enter. You stand at the sink, rinsing a plate, and remember a decision from years ago. Not a major scandal. Not a cinematic turning point. Something smaller. A path chosen because it was stable. Because it was practical. Because other people needed you to be reliable. At the time, the choice made perfect sense. It may even have been the right one. But now, older and looking back, you feel the echo of another question under it: what did that choice cost me? This is where many people become unfair to their younger selves. They look back with current wisdom and use it like a weapon. Why didn't I know better? Why didn't I speak more clearly? Why didn't I take the risk? Why did I keep saying yes? Why did I stay silent? But this kind of judgment creates heat, not peace. It sharpens internal conflict. It does not resolve it. Because the truth is simpler, and harder to emotionally accept. You made those decisions with the awareness you had then. With the pressures you were living under then. With the fatigue, fear, responsibilities, and emotional limitations that belong to that stage of your life. Understanding that does not erase consequence. But it changes the tone of the conversation you are having with your own past. And tone matters. You dry the plate. Set it aside. Then stand still for a moment, looking out the window at nothing in particular. A delivery truck passes. Somewhere nearby, a mower starts up and then fades. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary day. Yet your mind is reviewing your life with unusual clarity. You realize how many people carry an alternate life in their imagination. The career they almost pursued. The city they almost moved to. The relationship they almost repaired. The trip they almost took. The version of themselves that seems, in retrospect, braver, freer, more emotionally alive. Sometimes that imagined life becomes so detailed it starts to feel more vivid than the one that actually happened. That is where peace begins to leak away. Not because fantasy is wrong. Because fantasy is frictionless. It has no mortgage. No sick parent. No exhausted marriage. No child to support. No decade of real pressures. It glows because it was never tested by reality. You walk down the hallway and stop at a shelf where old photographs sit in mismatched frames. You pick one up. Look at a younger version of yourself standing beside. People whose lives crossed yours in ways you did not fully understand at the time. You look at your face in the picture. There is no revelation in it. No dramatic recognition. Just a quieter truth, he did not know what you know now. And you cannot ask him to have known it. That is the beginning of compassion. Not excuse. Not sentimental forgiveness that denies damage. Compassion. The kind that says, I see your limits. I see your effort. I see the context you were trapped inside. And I will not use knowledge you had not yet earned to prosecute you forever. You set the frame down. Carefully. You sit in the chair again and feel the friction between two realities. The life that happened. The life that might have been. One is textured, imperfect, real. The other is clean, unfinished, impossible to disprove. Peace requires choosing reality, not because fantasy was worthless, but because reality is where your actual life is still happening. There is no parallel version of you living better somewhere else. That imagined man does not wake with your knees, your memories, your accumulated tenderness, your same private losses, your same hard-earned understanding. He is not living. He is a mental construction. And the more energy you give him, the less presence you have for the only life still available to you. This is a difficult release. Harder than many people admit. Because alternate lives can be comforting in a perverse way. They preserve innocence. They protect you from fully owning what did happen. But ownership is the doorway to peace. You cannot reconcile with an imagined version of your story. You can only reconcile with the one that unfolded. The one with compromise in it. The one with duty. The one with mistakes that made sense at the time. The one with silences, loyalties, compromises, and emotional absences that were never ideal but were nonetheless real. This is where a contrarian truth enters. Many people think peace comes from discovering that everything happened exactly as it should have. That is not peace. That is often denial wearing spiritual language. Real peace is more adult than that. It says, some things should have gone differently. Some things were handled poorly. Some opportunities were lost. Some wounds were passed along. And still, this is my life. Still, I can stop fighting its reality. Still, I can choose not to add self-hatred to what has already been hard enough. By afternoon, the light begins to soften slightly. You make tea you don't really want, just for the ritual of holding something warm again. You sit and feel the truth settling more deeply. Your life was not perfect. It was human. That sentence does not solve everything. But it steadies something in you. Because perfection was never the real standard. Honesty is. And honesty says the story contains courage and compromise, love and avoidance, wisdom and immaturity, generosity and fear. Both. Always both. Peace begins when you can hold both without needing to erase either. The deepest emotional moments after 60 often do not happen in public. They happen in rooms no one else sees. Late afternoon drifts toward evening. The house changes temperature. The light turns gold for a while, then thinner, then uncertain. You move through the familiar spaces of your home with the quiet restlessness that comes when something internal is close to surfacing. You straighten a cushion. Walk into the bedroom. Open a drawer. Close it again. Stand in the doorway for no obvious reason. Then, on your way back down the hall, you stop at the mirror. This time you do not almost pass it. You stop fully. Look directly. Not at your age. Not at your face alone. At the expression underneath the face. And something in you recognizes itself with uncomfortable precision. Not the outer image. The burden. The way you have been carrying your life even in stillness. You keep looking. And for a moment, something uncomfortable becomes clear in a way it never has before. You don't just see your life. You see how you lived inside it. Controlled. Measured. Necessary. Reliable. But not always present. Your jaw tightens slightly. Not from tension. From recognition. And then the thought lands. Not softly. Not gradually. Direct. Precise. Almost physical. You didn't just live your life. You endured it, in ways you never fully admitted. You inhale slowly. The air feels heavier than it should. Because now, you can see it. The way you stayed ahead of your own emotions. The way you replaced feeling with function. The way you kept moving, so you wouldn't have to stop long enough to ask whether you were actually okay. And for the first time, that pattern does not feel like strength. It feels like cost. You grip the edge of the hallway table beside you. Not because you are falling. Because the statement feels physically true. You walk into the bedroom. Open a drawer. Inside, old documents. Receipts. Papers you haven't touched in years. Your hand moves through them without purpose. Then it stops. Not because you found something important. Because you realized, you don't remember why half of this mattered so much at the time. You close the drawer slowly. And that's when it hits you again. Not everything you carried, needed to be carried that long. You walk back into the living room and sit down harder this time. The room dims. You do not turn on the light immediately. The fading daylight is enough. And in that half-light, scenes begin surfacing. Not random. The same kind of moments over and over. Times when you chose silence to preserve peace. Times when you chose stability over something you couldn't justify. Times when you stayed emotionally guarded because being guarded seemed more responsible than being vulnerable. And then the harder truth arrives. Maybe the hardest truth is not that life was imperfect. Maybe it's that parts of it were lived, without you fully there. You lean forward, elbows on your knees, hands clasped tight. Your chest feels heavy. Your throat too. And for the first time, you stop defending it. Night comes quietly. You turn on a lamp in the corner instead of the overhead light. The room becomes softer, more intimate. On the side table beside the chair there is a notebook. You pick it up. Open it. For a while, you write nothing. Then one sentence: I do not want to carry emotional debt into the years I have left. You stare at the line. It feels more honest than elegant. Because forgiveness at this stage is not elegant. It is necessary. There is something uncomfortable about forgiveness that most people avoid admitting. Sometimes, holding on to pain feels like control. It gives the past weight. It gives your story structure. It gives you a reason for why things feel the way they do. Letting go of that pain can feel like losing identity. And that is why many people don't actually want peace. They want resolution without release. But peace does not work that way. It requires something more difficult. The willingness to exist, without needing your past to justify your present. You stand. Walk slowly into the kitchen. Pour a glass of water. The dark window reflects you back. You look at yourself there and understand something clearly. Forgiveness is not approval. It is release. Release from expecting the past to change. Release from replaying moments just to feel something familiar. Release from demanding that your younger self should have known what only time could teach. You return to the chair. Sit down. Pick up your phone. Scroll to an old message thread. A name you haven't touched in years. You don't open it. Just look. Your thumb hovers. Then you lock the screen. Not avoidance. Awareness. You understand something now. Not every connection needs to be restored. But every emotional weight needs to be understood. You sit there longer. And for the first time, forgiveness does not feel like something you say. It feels like something you stop doing. You stop tightening. You stop arguing. You stop rehearsing. And that stopping creates space. At some point after 60, a final kind of honesty becomes available. Not because everything is resolved. Because you finally understand that it won't be. There will be no perfect version of your life. No final draft where everything makes complete sense. There will only be continuation. And continuation asks for something different. Acceptance. The lamp is still on. The rest of the room is dark. You sit in the same chair, but your posture is different now. Less braced. More settled. You are not waiting for something to change. You are noticing what already has. You stand and walk slowly through the house. Your hand brushes lightly against the wall as you pass. You stop near the window. Look at your reflection layered over the dark outside. And for a moment, there is no comparison. No alternate version. No argument. Just you. As you are. In the life that is yours. And something inside you finally becomes clear. Maybe peace is not healing. Maybe it is simply the moment you stop resisting the fact that this is the life that happened. You breathe in. Slowly. Then out. The room is quiet. But the silence feels different now. Not empty. Not waiting. Just, still. You walk back to the chair. Sit down one last time. And you notice something subtle but undeniable. The absence of inner argument. Not complete. But enough. Enough to recognize it. You reach for the lamp switch. Pause for a second. Then turn it off. The room goes dark. And for the first time, the silence does not feel like something that needs to be filled. It feels like something that finally, no longer needs to be explained.